many ways, Tekken 6 is a transitional game. It's the first Tekken to be on an HD console. It's the first Tekken to be on a non-PlayStation console. It's the first Tekken to be made after Namco merged with Bandai to become Bandai Namco. Yes, the toy manufacturer. And it's the first Tekken not to have an actual tournament. I mean, it does get announced, but Jin is going through some shit, but let's talk about that later. Right now, let's discuss Tekken 6's new mechanics. There are two versions of Tekken 6, the arcade version and the home version called Bloodline Rebellion, which is the Dark Resurrection of Tekken 6. This game introduces two new mechanics, the Rage system and the Bound system. The Rage system kicks in automatically whenever a fighter's health gauge drops to critical levels. When in Rage mode, you do more damage, just like Street Fighter 4's Revenge gauge or Tag's Netsu system, but with less requirements. The Bound system gives each fighter several moves that can juggle airborne opponents by making them bounce off the ground whenever they fall to set up another combo or attack. If you ever want to know when Tekken became a juggle fest, it started here. To be fair, previous Tekkens had juggle potential, but they were offset by other factors like weird controls or physics. The latter of which got improved on here, which makes this all possible. It's simple stuff in theory, but what isn't simple is trying to explain this game's plot. The zaibatsu under Jin Kazama's reign is a disaster. He basically uses the vast resources of the zaibatsu to turn into a private terrorist military. He cuts ties with every nation and wages a global war for some unknown reason. Meanwhile, Kazuya has taken over G-Corp and sees that Jin's actions are getting in the way of his plans of world domination. So, he puts a bounty on his son's head. When Jin hears of this, he announces another tournament to try and take down both his father and G-Corp at the same time. This is the Cliff Notes version of the plot, and I'll be honest, most of the confusion people have with 6's plot is because of Jin. But it's also the first time the main story involves people that aren't a Mishima or a Kazama. Because of this, I'll be explaining the character section a bit differently this time. The fighters can be broken up into three camps: pro-Jin, anti-Jin, and neutral. And pro-Jin, you obviously have Jin Kazama. Nina Williams is hired by Jin to be his bodyguard. Eddie Gordo is a bodyguard in exchange for his master's medical care. Lee Chaolana is worried about his G-Corp stock, and he's also worried about G-Corp being run by Kazuya. Ling Xiaoyu is trying to stop Jin from being evil, and Panda is just following Xiaoyu. In the anti-Jin camp, you have Kazuya Mishima. He's the head of G-Corp. You have Devil Jin, which, don't really need to explain that. Heihachi Mishima, he wants to reclaim the Zaibatsu. And, he shot Jin back in Tekken 3, so obviously anti-Jin. You got Anna Williams, who's hired by G-Corp because she wants to fight Nina again. You have Alisa Boskanovich, an android created by Dr. Boskanovich based off of the appearance of his deceased daughter. She teams up with Lars to fight Jin, and Lars Alexanderson, leads a rebel faction of Tekken Force soldiers. He's also one of Heihachi's bastard children. I think there's like 9 of these motherfuckers or something. You have Kuma, who wants to defeat Jin and reclaim the Zaibatsu. You have Bruce Irvin, who's working for G-Corp. Asuka Kazama wants to stop Jin. Sergei Dragunov is ordered to stop the Zaibatsu. Miguel Caballero Roja wants revenge on Jin for the Tekken Force bombing his sister's wedding and killing her. Lily de Rochefort wants to stop the Zaibatsu from ruining her father's business and taking over his oil fields. Lei enters the tournament in order to try and arrest Jin. And Wang Jinrei wants to stop Jin. And then in the neutral camp, you have Armor King, who wants to fight King and Marduk some more. Brian Fury is bored of being a mercenary and he wants a more challenging fight. Christy Monteiro wants to find Eddie. Ganryu wants to promote his restaurant. Julia Chong and Raven want to stop Jin and Kazuya from clashing. Hwoarang wants to have a rematch with Jin. Beck Dusan wants to compete in the tournament. King and Craig Marduk want to find Armor King. Feng Wei wants to get stronger. Martial Law and Paul Phoenix want to win the prize money. Steve Fox teams up with Law and Paul to learn about different styles of fighting while his boxing matches have been cancelled due to all the terrorism going on. Yoshimitsu needs to kill evil people to stop his sword from corrupting him. According to Bandai Namco, he's still human. Robert Bob Richards wants to prove the strength of his fatness to the world. With Jack 6, Jane is sending him to investigate the rumors of other Jack robots being mass-produced for warfare. Leo Clyson wants to investigate Kazuya for the disappearance of their father and death of their mother. Roger Jr. and his mom are fighting for the prize money since Roger no longer supports them. Mokujin gets revived again due to a new evil that's threatening the world. Zafina is worried about the true threat to the world and seeks to stop it. So everybody from the last game returns, plus a handful of newcomers. There is only one real new mode this time, and it's a pretty big one. All the modes from the last game return except Arcade History, which was never coming back to begin with. Arcade mode is now called Ghost Battle, and Devil Within has been replaced with a new mode called Scenario Campaign. 6's Scenario Campaign plays like Devil Within, except it's much more linear with all the platforming removed. This time you can go from level to level, solo, or in co-op, with the second player being Elisa. You do have the option of playing as other characters besides Lars and Elisa if you beat them in this mode, so you're not stuck with them if you don't want to be. You walk and beat up people with your fists or random weapons that show up from time to time. At the end of each stage, you earn money to use in the customization mode and gear that you can equip to your character to increase your stats, giving this mode some light RPG elements. The whole thing is tied together via a map where you choose your level or go straight to a special arena area where you can fight through an arcade ladder and unlock character endings. And for the first time, this game's mode is actually the story of Tekken 6. Here's what went down. Lars Alexanderson leads a rebellion of Tekken Force soldiers to oppose the Zaibatsu. During a mission, he gets hurt and ends up with amnesia. He later finds a capsule with an android inside of it named Elisa, who was created by Dr. Voskanovich in the image of his deceased daughter. The pair escapes the facility and gets attacked by G-Corp. Meanwhile, Jin is somewhere planning something, but Nina and Eddie are in the dark about what it is. Lars eventually meets up with his squad, and his lieutenant, Tongo, tells him to go see Heihachi to hopefully bring back some of his memories. Jin and Nina arrive in an old temple in the desert and is confronted by a mysterious woman named Safina. She warns them about the evil that's being sealed within the temple. Elsewhere, Lars and Elisa fight their way through to Heihachi. It is then revealed that Lars is Heihachi's son and that the Zaibatsu has info on some ancient prophecy. Sometime later, Lars and Elisa meet Li Chaolan and they form an alliance to take on the Zaibatsu and G-Corp. When they hear about one of Li's allies being in danger, Lars and Elisa volunteer to help. Lars rejoins his men and they raid G-Corp. From there, they face a gauntlet of opponents from G-Corp, the Zaibatsu, and a giant robot, with some help from Raven. Lars eventually faces Jin, but Jin hijacks Elisa and makes her attack Lars. She leaves and Raven shows up to team up with Lars and they head to the temple in the desert where Jin is. At the temple, Lars fights Kazuya again, but he escapes. Lars and Raven then proceed to the temple's main chamber. Tekken has a history of having some wild-ass final bosses in their games, and Tekken 6 will be no different. Azazel is a giant crystal dragon man, and he is the source of the Devil Gene. Lars starts fighting Azazel and defeats him. On his way from leaving the temple, he faces off against Elisa and Jin once again. And it is here where we learn why Jin started a fucking war.
深淵を除くならば深淵もまた等しくお前を見返すその通りだな何の話だきっかけはあの女だった繰り返し頭に響く声の正体を知ったのはザフィーナかああだが聞かされた話に俺は違和感を覚えたアザゼルはすでに精神体として復活を遂げていたからだ奴の復活は必然だったとでも言うのか俺とカズヤ二人の存在が鍵だったでも奴は万物が発する負のエネルギーで我は実体化を果たすとアザゼルの思念は語っていたその時こそが唯一のチャンスだ
だからこの戦争を起こしたというのか。奴を実体化させるために。
そうだ。俺はやらねばならなかった。デビルの力を持つ者として。
だからといってお前が起こしたことが正当化されるわけじゃない。
では聞こう。世界、国家、民族、宗教、それらが持つ論理で何を成し遂げてきた。
それは。
これまでも人は武力という名の恐怖に怯え、暴力によって支配されてきた。そんな歪んだ世界を誰が救える。俺はアザゼルとの戦いの果てに互いに消滅することを望んだ。その時こそ俺はこの呪われたちの呪縛から解放され、結果世界は救われる。だが一度だけだ。次はない。
しかし奴は俺が倒した。
お前は何も分かっていない。そうだ。俺はこの時を待っていた。言ったはずだ。倒すことができるのはデビルの力を持つ者だけだと。そう。俺以外にはな。俺は全てを終わらせる。
何をする気だ。
Oh man, where do we begin? Okay, so Jin's plan was to do war so hard that it would awaken Azazel so he can fight and kill him and potentially destroy the Devil Gene at the same time. You know, it makes sense if you don't think about it, but I have a brain and I tend to think about shit, and I have concluded that all Jin really had to do was not start a fucking war. It's even dumber when you realize that A, Azazel not being corporeal means that you can't hit him, but he can't hit you. B, Azazel was playing Jin from the start. Obviously, he's going to say whatever he needs to say to get revived, which leads to C, Jin assumed killing Azazel would eradicate the Devil Gene. Azazel never stated as such, and even if he did, would you really believe him? Does that look like the face of a trustworthy individual? Anyway, Lee helps Lars revive Elisa, and Raven goes back to the desert and finds Jin. In any case, Jin gets missing in the desert, the tournament gets cancelled, and it marks the first time in the mainline game where there was no actual tournament. There are no real results to speak of either. Most of this shit obviously didn't happen as nobody fought Azazel except for Jin and Lars. Other stuff may have happened, but it's stuff that really wouldn't affect the plot anyway. Only endings that matter is the stuff with Armor King and the stuff with Eddie's master / Christie's grandfather dying from his illness and Eddie quitting the Tekken Force. Well, that's Tekken 6. I know it seemed like I was complaining a lot in the last bit. I mean, I was, but Tekken 6 is still a good Tekken game at the end of the day. Damn good, in fact. It plays well, and there are a decent amount of modes to mess with. However, Tekken 6 is just kinda there in the grand scheme of things. In fact, this is the first time I touched 6 in years since I got it. Once the next game came out, I had gotten my fill of 6, and so did many others. Tekken 6 is like Tekken 2 to me. It's an amazing game, but it doesn't break new ground like the first game, and it isn't as memorable as the game that came after it. The only thing people remember about 6 is the campaign, and to a greater extent, Jin's heel turn story. A story that has been made completely pointless. By the time this video comes out, Tekken 8 would have already been released. I did play through the story mode the other day, and yeah, pretty much everything Jin did in Tekken 6 was pointless. But the characters do call him out on his bullshit in the story at least. But that's a story for another time. Which isn't bullshit is this next Tekken game, which finally returns us back to tag.